This is a long-awaited video on Zoom for you in 826. This is about your 10th week discussion, which I've been slow to get to. I wanted to make a note of some resources that were mentioned in this discussion. Red Cat microphone that April Headley mentioned, National Geographic Reach, Katie Parlane, and co-writer mentioned by Gustavo. And I don't know a lot about these, but I wanted to mention them, so I investigate them. I noticed I mentioned a thing on April as I go through this. You teach in the, the dual language program, and I think Lexington, obviously, and I'm a big advocate of that. Any of you get a chance, I've been thinking I should ask some people in the class in Lexington to talk about the dual language program on video. Maybe I could interview you on Zoom. I just think it's a great idea. I know most places won't be able to do it, but it was something I was really excited about. My daughter was just too young or too old to start it. She was a first grader when they started in kindergarten. And I appreciate, April, you like the Suggestopedia. You mentioned camping. You do kind of a thing where you make s'mores and you do camping in your classroom, which is really role playing, and that's a huge advantage. I think kids love that. It's with the imagination, all kinds of things are possible. Now, some other things that came up that I wanted to mention. Brittany, you talked about having, Laura had talked about a small group, and you talked about one of my favorite things about school I work with is we have a walk to read, a walk to math program. This program allows us to group the kids by academic and support level. I can have a group of high math students work with low, high group, one-on-one during small groups. And so you get a mixed group there, but I really like the idea, and differentiated is that you have mixed groups and you have students able to help other students, or students outside come in and help. You know, if you had high school come down, work with elementary kids and read to them, that'd be similar. And Brittany, you mentioned one student and I read a test passage together to make sure she pronounces everything correctly. Then I read the test questions to her. Not only does this let me better understand what she does and does not understand, but it keeps her on track as well. So anytime you can find out what the student is thinking, that's a huge advantage. Okay. In April, you mentioned about having tranquil music, tranquilo, word in Spanish. I like the Suggestopedia. So I bounce back and forth between differentiating and Suggestopedia. I like the Suggestopedia because of the emphasis on relaxation and really concerned by the emotions and the feel of the graduates, of the students. Shannon, you had a nice passage. I'm going to read this because it was good. I have had some fun experiences with differentiation. My first years of teaching, I was just trying to survive, and I started 2 grade levels in those 3 years. It was hard enough to understand the regular curriculum, let alone change it for kids. I do regret that during my youth, in Birmingham, the lack of curriculum allowed me to become more flexible and helped me realize what kids needed. I was able to differentiate by product. What did they produce? I'd create worksheets on 3 different levels for my math class. I would create material based on 5th grade material, but also create enrichment activities, and the last would be geared toward basics and using visuals to help with math facts. In Lincoln, I differentiate by interest and create whole group word problems with students' names. I like that you put the students' names in the word problems so they kind of own up to it, like Fernando is going down the highway at 50 miles an hour, something like that. I could see drawing pictures, and or getting in his desk, pretending to have a steering wheel. In Lincoln, I differentiate by interest and create whole group word problems with students' names. I just said that. I use stories that involve Fortnite or dance just to keep them engaged. For an EL, I will go over homework that involves story problems to lead them in the right direction. In regard to reading content, I would try to keep it as much the same as possible. I would have a partner, I would have them partner with me, always to make sure they're on the right spot when we group read to become familiar with the words. I also love the idea of mixed ability groupings, which you've mentioned. When presenting a lesson, I would be sure to use more visuals and have the student repeat and do more echo reading as we move through the lesson. A lot of good stuff there. And then, let's see, I think I have one thing. Katie Parlane, you said, but learning songs and singing along is such a quick way to start using language. I really like the REACH program that includes songs. They are usually set to familiar tunes like Wheels on the Bus, which are easy for kids to pick up. I also had a teacher some time ago that would use songs, and they were simple ones from 1960s sitcoms. Like if anybody's ever heard of Gilligan's Island, I won't sing it for you, but it goes something like this. Da 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 da. And then what you do is it's very simple, and you can actually change and put different words in there. And she actually, Slade's long retired, but she learned to play chords on a guitar, the basic chords for some of these songs. And so they had a sing along, and so they sang, and then they sang the song, and it was fun and music, and kids liked it. Little multiple intelligence there. Patricia, you mentioned to Shannon, I like your idea about creating worksheets on different levels for different students. And what's, it should be qualitative differentiation, not quantitative. That's important. Okay. Alyssa, you had a very important question. As a pre-service teacher, I do wonder how much additional time a teacher should put into creating different formats or activities or assessments based on student level. How much time does it take to do differentiation? Obviously, you want to differentiate where it matters and not differentiate for the sake of it. Also, I think it's very important if the curriculum is aligned, you do similar things every year. Once you do a differentiated assignment, you should be able to use it again and again. You shouldn't have to recreate stuff year after year. I know when you're a veteran teacher, you get the opportunity to use this similar lesson. Well, then you just pull it out. You've already got it done. You just make a few adjustments. April, one I put a big star on. You were replying to Shannon Dahlgren. I was very impressed with your differentiation in the classroom. I differentiate by interest and create whole group word problems with students' names. I think I've read something like that before. Maybe I'm getting a little feeble here. But I like that idea of the name. I think I already said that. So I flipped these without numbers on them, so occasionally I repeat myself. Katie Neerman. Right now, most of my students are at the same level. I work mainly with students that have an IEP. I try to find quality information to share with my students. I really do not like textbooks that we have. I have 2 students who are EL in my class. I try to add a lot of visual information and find videos. I do use a lot of graphic organizers to check for understanding. And you mentioned TPR. I'm going to put on a thing about TPR, total physical response. A brief, if you don't know what that is, basically you act out actions. For instance, if you're teaching kids to respond, you're doing oral language instruction, you have them stand up and say, put your hand on your head, put your hand on your nose. It's kind of like Simon Says, only it's not a trick. It's not Simon Says, they do everything. And then they associate the physical movement. And the energy of doing the movement helps them recall because it's like visual. It's a tactile thing. Very useful information there. Amber, you mentioned multiple intelligence, which I think is very useful. Like I said, I don't think multiple intelligence has any basis in theory because we don't store information in our brain that way. But as a kind of a structure, it's nice to have multiple intelligence to think about it. So if I want to teach something, I can teach history, and then I can use music to teach history, or I can use drawing, or I can use dance, physical movement. I can use that to teach history. I can use cooking, things that are movement, smell, different senses. So history is not just reading, but it's also experiencing things. Big advocate of that. Let me get into some of my other ones. Katie, you made a great statement. You said the key with differentiation, though, is not to lower the academic level. That's what people have to realize. And I've seen so many cases where people differentiate, and what they do is they give something that's almost unrelated. I saw a really terrible case of this. A guy that was teaching very high level, difficult, inappropriate 8th grade geography. And he was using material from a textbook that was way over their heads. But for the EL students, he gave them a word search, which had nothing to do with the material. Basically, here is an assignment that I know you can do if you'll just sit down and do it. You won't learn anything by it. It doesn't have anything to do with the lesson. It's not a case of differentiation. It's totally different. And both of the assignments, ironically, were bad because the material for the 8th graders was too difficult. I know because my son was sick and I had to help him with it. And I found it was about Earth tectonics and continental drift. And I said, this is harder. This is college level, and I have trouble understanding it. Imagine an 8th grader. And then what the other group got was nothing. It was just crossword puzzles and things like that. Word search. I hate word search. I like to hear a defense of word search. I like something also you said, for example, is about talking. For example, a student might say, I seen her outside, which is wrong. I would simply respond, oh, you saw her outside. Rather than say, you're wrong, I just give I respond to you, but use the correct format. Students are hearing the correct usage of the language without me saying you're wrong or you didn't do it right. We would use this language all day if we use this approach to correct students. You have to respect people if you don't say they're wrong. First meet your mother-in-law, you don't go up and correct her speech. You probably don't even correct it at all, but here's a good one on Suggestopedia. And I wasn't sure who this was because I cut it off. But it was about Suggestopedia, and it said, an example of a situation where Suggestopedia approach might enhance is my reading class. I could put music to a story or poem we're reading. We recently just read a poem in our reading textbook. Maybe a student could sing the poem to the rhythm of a well-known song. And this is also where Gustavo mentioned the term, the program co-writer, which is, I wanted to touch on that again. April, another one, you said Suggestopedia seems to be more teacher controlled than student controlled. This was an interesting concept to me because who's in control of the classroom, and is that control, is it okay for students to have control if they're on task, you know? Interesting little concepts, kind of subtle. We each have our own preferences about how much control we want in the classroom. So looking at it from that angle, you want to make sure that in a way you're still in control, but the students are participating and engaged. So that may be an issue there. Here's another Patricia. I'll just read this. One thing I love about designing lessons that have an open-ended production aspect, the students that may be very advanced can have a chance to display their understanding by creating a more complex project. And a student with less ability still can do the content, but can show it in a less complex way. Like the text said, quality is more important than quantity. And that's something that's very important. I mentioned somebody said, I'd rather them do 2 or 3 math problems and understand it than do 20 in quantity and still not understand it. So comprehension is more important than, there's no comprehension in masses. I mean, if you do it 20 times badly, you still haven't got anything done. Like the text, quality is more important than quantity. I don't want my students with advanced skills to do twice as much work. Remember the old deal about honors classes? You get to do 3 pages of math instead of 1. So you do more homework, but not challenging homework. One reason is because my job is to encourage creativity in the arts, but also because they are helping to design the way the project is done. They are challenging themselves in ways that can be engaging. This is a part of the self-selecting interest area that can help their understanding of the project. One big push in our district is students working with partners. I think this goes along with differentiation because some students learn better by talking with their friends. They decide who will be the recorder and they discuss questions and possible answers together. I see a lot of rich stuff in this. Working in small groups or in partners and in recording it might be a great way to monitor how students are improving their proficiency in language. Maybe they need to be mentored, or you can pair them up in a way that somebody can, the other students may kind of repeat and correct without correcting directly. ELs do make up a large portion of my school, and if I taught reading or other academic subjects, I would make sure to change up the grouping in different ways, not just by ability, but also by learning style. I feel you mentioned, I feel I do use some of the Suggestopedia techniques in my art room. That's interesting. I keep my room colors neutral in the bulletin board so that I don't have too much overload. Never thought of that. That's interesting about the color, too many bright colors at a time. Use soft, relaxing music. As opposed to me, I would fall asleep during soft, relaxing music. Now, here's an interesting one Norma Malcolm put up. I struggle with differentiating instruction for my class. I also struggle with difference between modifying assignments and what is differentiating instruction. Sometimes I think differentiating is actually just modifying. I do like the chart on page 34 for ideas on differentiating activities. And I put down, I like that chart too, it's very useful. I usually differentiate instruction for students. I try to teach a concept in different ways. Well, that is differentiating. Try to make PowerPoint presentations to explain the material, provide notes to students. I show the video wherever possible, whenever possible. We read the chapter together, but also sometimes I assign certain pages for students to read with a partner. Okay, I like that. I pair up students in a way there is a higher ability student with a lower ability student. This is modifying by process, I would call it. You know, the one example in the video, I think is in our videos, is having students doing a science project, and for some of the students, setting up the project is very complicated, so you do some of that work for them in advance. And then you have a program help them do, they're measuring what ice does to the temperature of water at different depths. And so some of the students, the stuff is set up ahead of time. Again, another group of students have minimal help there. They have to set up the experiment, put the thermometers in, do everything. And then more advanced group gets something totally different. They get kind of a mind problem. Instead of working with lab equipment, they have to think through, they're given a question about a real life situation and video and stuff, resources, and they have to decide what's causing a fog over, someplace near San Francisco. And so you have three different approaches, three different processes, but the concepts being studied are the same. Moisture, rolling in, the temperature of the land, temperature of the water difference, things like that. And so that's fairly complicated. So it depends on what's going to work for you. Almost done. Sarah Kocharoff, I wanted to highlight something. Oh, very simple thing, but very important. As teachers, we decided it would be better if students really understood how to do 2 or 3 problems than to just throw a lot of problems at them and they still didn't understand it, which means you need to be able to slow the pace and focus at times. So I always wanted to mention that because differentiation, you get an opportunity to focus and slow down. I don't like it when people are do all these problems and then turn it in. And this is how, if anytime you race past people and they don't understand something, you're wasting your time. This from Chelsea, when I assign the homework, I have my Yale students come back to my table so I'm able to explain the directions in more detail. They're able to ask questions they have. I also allow my students to come to me in the morning before the bell rings with their questions. When I'm teaching lessons, I try to include visuals and examples. When I group my students, I try to group them with a purpose. During group work, during math, I assign the group jobs to students. We have a reader, a teacher, and a coach. I want my EL students to participate, so I have them be the teacher some of the time. So they rotate. It's a very good point. And also one other little thing mentioned, during the math test, students are stressed out. You let them go anywhere in the room they want, take the test. They can hide under their desk. They can sit in the corner. They can set up in a loft, wherever it is. I like that because that really, there's something about having a little freedom. You don't feel like you're stuck there looking at the paper. So if they can have that, I like the idea of little lofts for kids. So that's my comments on your discussion on the 10th week. I was a little late getting this, but I wanted to go through and highlight these points. So I hope you listen to this and appreciate my commentary. And I'm trying to give each of you, some of you, direct responses in some cases. Thank you.